It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing my buddy who's celebrating his birthday, Dr. Robert Goldenberg, who goes by Robbie.
Go by Robbie.
And happy birthday, buddy.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure.
So
pleasure to be here.
You're the big 72 years old.
72 years young.
72 years young, and you look great. You really do. And I'm jealous that you still have more hair than me. But you know what? I want to get, the reason I want to get you is because you graduated from dental school in 69.
I did.
And you know why 69 is my favorite number?
I understand that.
Because that's how old Mother Teresa was when she won her Nobel Peace Prize.
Excellent.
And she was just canonized as a saint last week.
Excellent.
She was my when I went to Catholic school, she was my favorite nun, and Martin Luther was my favorite priest.
Great.
But podcasters are young. There's no one our age listening to a podcast. I mean, I get like maybe one email every 3 months says, "Hey Howard, I'm an old fart. I listen to your podcast." But they're probably 20% in dental school, and the rest are all under 30. Most of them are working as an associate, corporate dentistry. They're all trying to find themselves. And so 1969, how many years have you practiced in? 2016,
48 maybe, is that right?
So 48 years, so 69, is that right? Here, gosh darn, I took algebra. 47 years, so your 3-year anniversary will be, your 50-year anniversary will be 2019.
Exactly.
And the dentist that motivated me to be a dentist, my next door neighbor, Kenny Anderson, he just celebrated his 50th anniversary. But I want to get you on there. Let's pretend that it's 2019 and you've done 50 years, because that just sounds so much more cool. 50 years of being a dentist, 5 decades. What advice would you give to all these 30 and under dentist kids listening to you right now?
Well, dentistry is a marvelous profession. I mean, it allowed me to live 3 years in Spain, to be basically semi-retired when I was 24 years old. My decision to become a dentist was an interesting one. My father and I had a discussion when I was in the 5th grade. My dad wanted to be a cardiac surgeon.
Your dad wanted to be a cardiac surgeon.
Correct. And he was a linen driver for domestic linen back in the early 40s or whatever, making maybe $150 a week, which was a lot of money back then. Well, my mother didn't want to give that up. And my father always wanted to be a doctor. And he never became one, so he wanted to have his son become one. So when I was in the 5th grade, we actually had an interesting conversation. We sat down and discussed what kind of a professional I would become. And I had 3 choices back then: physician, a dentist, or a lawyer. And I thought about it for a while. And the physicians I know work a lot of long hours. I mean, they work really hard, long hours. Lawyers read a lot, which I really was never a big reader, even then and even now, so to speak. So I'll become a dentist. That was my decision in the 5th grade. And I lived with that through high school, through college, became a dentist, and here I am 50 years later.
And you know, that is such an excellent parenting question, because a lot of these young kids will be having kids, and it's so interesting how in so many cultures the children talk to the parents talk to the children, not that, are you going to go to college? Like, what are you going to be in college? Or what college are you going to go to? And I've lived in, and Creighton was in downtown poor part of Omaha, and Kansas City was downtown poor part of Omaha, and I witnessed so many times when a little 10-year-old kid would say, his mom said, "Well, when I grow up, I might be a dentist." And then the mother just blurted out, "You'll never get in college. You'll never go to college." And I just thought, why in the hell would you say that to a kid? But the cultures that tell their kids, what college are you going to go to? You want to be a doctor, dentist, lawyer, and now look at you. I mean, wow, the power of suggestion.
Today, I believe it's difficult. Dentistry is a wonderful profession. It's part intellectual, it's part artistic. It really kind of addresses all of the intellectual senses that you can have. It's not an easy profession. And when I started, I mean, I don't like to say this to kids that are in college now, my first semester in dental school, it cost me $970. So the cost of dental school now is so exorbitant. I mean, these kids come out of school, $250,000, $300,000 in debt. I know a periodontist, he's $350,000 in debt. It makes it difficult. You don't see the end of the tunnel till you're in your 50s. And it makes it hard. And I see something because I'm right now, I don't practice on a regular basis. I'm a locum tenens dentist. What that means is I work for dentists on a part-time basis. Somebody's sick, somebody's injured. I work through a couple of dental agencies. I do something for the military. So I don't have let's say, a quote-unquote permanent job. And what I find is that because of the financial pressure that some of these kids are under, it impacts a little bit of what I see of how dentistry is practiced. It's a little bit over treatment, a little bit getting out there, doing things that perhaps I, as an old school dentist, wouldn't do in the way that I've learned to do it. But it's a very rewarding profession, and I would recommend anybody that can become a dentist to become one.
So these kids have $350,000, and a third of them, let's maybe 17% have no debt. Their dad is a dentist. A third have over 350, a third are 200 to 300, and a third are 200 to 100. What advice would you give them? I mean, do you think, because they're wondering, if I go work at corporate, or I go in the military, or I go get an associate job, and I finally get down a decent speed for a filling, a crown, a root canal, the average practice selling, well, you broker practice.
Yes.
Let me read your bio. I forgot to read your bio. I was just so excited it was your birthday. Ryan, can you run and get us a birthday cake real quick? And I'll use any excuse to eat a cake.
According to the numbers that I remember, and this may have changed somewhat, when I was brokering more practices, the average dental sales price averaged about 72%, 72 to 75% of the previous year's production. That was a general rule. I'm not familiar with the current prices of dental practices, but I think that was a general rule, which is kind of on the one hand difficult from somebody, let's say, who's in a business. A guy that builds a business, maybe he'll end up selling his practice for 5 or 10 times, EBITDA is his bottom line revenues. Whereas a dentist is sort of restricted by the fact that a dental practice is very individually focused. When you have a practice, the people come to that practice because of you. When you go, then that kind of changes the parameters of the practice. But when I sold my practice, the guy that bought it, he's doing really well, and he's increased the revenues, he's increased the practice, and he's doing very well.
So what he just said, EBITDA is an accounting term, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. And it'd be nice not to sell a practice based on its production, because what if the dental practice did $1 in sales but had $1.10 overhead? So it'd be nice to do it on a function of earnings, net income, profit. That's what EBITDA is, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. But the real MBA analysis of how much anything is worth is what anybody's willing to pay for it. So there's no formula for what is your house worth. It's just what are similar houses selling for in the market today down the street. But the general office that's, the average house that's selling is 3-bedroom, 2-bath. A house like mine would be in this market is an illiquid asset. I think there's 35 homes for sale in my neighborhood, and none of them are even getting offers. So I live in an illiquid asset. But so if she walks out with $350,000 student loan, she works at Heartland or Pacific for a couple of years, and she wants to buy a practice. Let's say it's $650,000. She's now 28 years old and $1 million in debt.
Correct.
So what would you tell her?
Well, time is on your side.
Yeah, it's good to be 28.
Exactly. It just really becomes a financial calculation. I mean, how do you live? How do you amortize the debt? How do you amortize your practice? That's what I said before, is that when a 28-year-old with $1 million in debt, given the fact they're going to buy a house, they're going to raise a family, do all those things, really, it's not until their mid-50s or early 50s that they really start to have all of that debt gone and paid off. But then, of course, then you start getting into the economic considerations of saving money early. My son had he and I had a conversation about that. He's not a dentist. He started a company in college, an internet company. And he had a certain amount of debt. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he was debating that, well, he was really thinking about paying off the debt rather than starting his 401k and his savings. And I explained to him why you don't do that, because you lose the time value of the dollar. There was a story I read once about two brothers. One was a saver and one was a spender. Well, when they were both in their 20s, the saver started his 401k, and he was putting in a couple grand a year or whatever the amount was. 8 years went by, and the spender decided that, well, maybe it's his time. Maybe he should do that. At the end of 8 years, the younger brother, who had contributed for 8 years, stopped contributing. The younger brother, or the older brother, started 8 years later. And when they were 65, the younger brother had more cash in his 401k than the son did. So it's all about compounding, and it's a matter of taking a look at your life structure, your life expenses, your debt, your indebtedness, and then figuring out a plan so you save a little bit, you retire debt a little bit, you live a little bit, rather than many dentists that I know, they live by the till. Whatever's in the till, they put in their pocket. And then they don't pay their bills if they have a bad month. They have staff issues and they don't pay their staff accordingly. God forbid they should give them a raise. I knew of one dentist who he had a 2-year entrance into his retirement plan. And then at the end of 2 years, he let everybody go, so he wouldn't have to put them in. So it's a matter of good economics. I mean, you're an MBA. You understand where I'm coming from. You know, it's a matter of managing money. It's a matter of really allocating things, and don't putting your life ahead of everything else. It's really kind of a life of really sharing, and it's a life of spreading things out so everything is taken care of. And then at some point, when you get older, things start to get better. This goes down, this goes up, and then you get to pay $200,000 for your kid's college.
So if she's 28, she's got $350 of student loans, buys $650, practice $1 million under. When do you think she'll be out of debt?
50.
50, and that'd be about the perfect time for a divorce, right?
Exactly.
So just as soon as you get debt free,
that's right.
Then you'll go in there.
That's how you make a small fortune. You start with a $1 million dental practice and you get a divorce.
So let me read your bio.
Okay.
Robert B. Goldenberg, D.D.S, is recognized for helping dentists become more successful, faster, easy, and more profitable than they might have been able to do on their own. He understands from his own personal experience the difficulties in treating patients while managing a dental business at the same time. Robbie, as he prefers to be called, hails from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and fled the frigid Midwest, landing in Arizona in the spring of 2005. He has over 45 years of active clinical practices in all phases of the field of general dentistry. He also has broad-based business experience as a managing partner for a large group dental practice, as well as going alone in his own practice startup. From a practice startup to marketing to practice sales and transition, he can be those extra set of eyes and ears that can help you cut right to the core of the issues and make your dental practice run more smoothly. He has personally been through the fire and learned the hard way what it takes to turn a common dental practice into a successful dental business. His solo dental practice was among the nation's upper 1% and featured a low-volume, high-fee, no-stress environment. Robbie attended the University of Michigan because he couldn't get accepted into Arizona State University, majoring in philosophy, and earned his D.D.S. there in 1969. So I want to tell you one thing. What advice you give to these kids? So a lot of them get jobs as associates, and it might be in a group practice. I don't like the term corporate dentistry because almost every dentist I know is incorporated or an LLC. When they say corporate dentistry, I think they're talking about big box chains where there's 35 chains that have over 50 offices in multiple states. But I'll meet a kid and he's in there. He's been working there for 2 years, and I see two different kids walk out of Heartland. One has stolen every management form known to man, every spreadsheet, just everything, and learned all the business system, because you figure, Rick Workman's managing 1,500 offices. He's got to have some systems. And then when he leaves to start up his own, he steals, the best office manager or the regional manager, and he walks out of there after 2 years. He has all of Heartland's forms. He's got a key employee, and they crush it. Then there's another kid after 2 years says, I want to own my own business. And you say, well, what's the code for a crown? No idea. Have you ever submitted an insurance claim? No, I didn't learn one business thing. And then he'll get on Dental Town and argue about bonding agents till 3 o'clock in the morning. So what advice would you give him? Because, and talk about that. What advice would you give them when they're going out and they're looking for associate, what they can learn?
Repeat your question. I thought you were getting to somebody buying an office. What kind of advice I would give them?
What advice would you give these kids when they go get an associateship? I mean, so a lot of them will send me an email and they'll say, well, I'm going back to Parsons, Kansas, and there's 2 guys hiring. And one will pay 25%, and I have to pay the lab bill, and the other guy will pay 30%, and I have to pay half the lab bill. Which is better? And I'm like, well, that's just the wrong question. I mean, what are you trying to learn? If you wanted to learn how to place implants, I would go find the guy that plays implants. I would prefer that you went and got a mentor in business, staff, leadership. But if you go into a big box chain like Aspen, Heartland, or whatever, I mean, you have the opportunity to go learn the systems of a corporation that's running hundreds of offices, where in my experience, most dentists don't have any systems in their one office. So what advice would you give these kids when they get out of school? What they should be looking for in an associate, what they should be trying to learn, and trying to pay back this $1 million of student loan, $350 of student loans, and buying a practice for $650. Is that enough questions out there? I threw 78 questions out there.
Let's take one road at a time. The kids that come out of school and go to work for corporate dentistry, and it is different, which I have a very low opinion of corporate dentistry, personally.
Okay, why?
Well, I think that corporate dentistry is totally different, in my opinion, from private practice. Private practice is based on relationship building, retention of patients, caring for the staff, doing what's right in order to build a long-lasting and a solid business. Corporate dentistry is the bottom line times how many stores you own. And I think that I've seen all of the systems from the various corporate situations that I've been in. It's all about the money at the end of the day. I worked in an office where we didn't have alginate for a week and a half. How can you run an office like that? Well, we can't place the order for 2 weeks. Well, how come? There's a device called a craniometer. You're familiar with it? Craniometer. It's a $135 plastic appliance. And what it does, this Dr. Kendallman, he discovered, and he provides the research, that the relationship between the corner of the eye and the tragus of the ear is the same as the vertical dimension. Now that's a phenomenal thing, because most of the ways that we do when we're making dentures, vertical dimension is almost like a guess. Or at least the way I was trained. In fact, it was funny. I stopped doing dentures at a certain point in my life, 30, 40 years into practice, because it's the only thing that I did that was only from the information I learned in dental school. I learned nothing new about making dentures. So I may be right or wrong. Maybe there are new systems now for doing it. But his system is wonderful. And I was working at a corporate office. I won't say which one it was. And I wanted to buy one.
You can tell me. I won't tell anyone.
It was General Dental.
Okay.
It took 2.5 months and half the intestinal lining from me to get it, because their prosthodontist hadn't heard of it. Look it up. It's on the line. It's on the internet. Finally, I was given permission to buy it, and they reimbursed me for it. So if a young kid is going into let's just call it a corporate environment, even a private practice, I think what they need to do is they need to really learn their skill. And when I was a dentist, I was never the same dentist 2 years after the day. I always did something different. I did ortho for 15 years. I got tired of the long-term relationship, and I went to become a cosmetic dentist at that time. I went to Larry Rosenthal's aesthetic, I think it's called, this was Aesthetic Advantage. And Larry is, I don't know if you know him, he's Larry.
I went to that course too, and spent a day in his office.
The next year, my practice grew $200,000. Same patient base, same everything. And in fact, when I went to, there's a dentist in Michigan called Wally Neiman. He's a prosthodontist. And once a year, he has a large, in fact, you'd be a perfect candidate for this.
Here in town?
In Michigan. And he has a large group, assembly. He brings all of his referring doctors and staff.
What's his name?
Wally Neiman, Walter Neiman. N-E-I-M-A.
Yeah, introduce us.
Pardon?
Introduce us.
Okay.
Send us both an email.
I'll do that. Anyway, he had 800 people there. And Larry came, and all these dentists they thought Larry was going to come to teach them how to do veneers. And what Larry, and guys were angry. There were guys who were really disappointed that he didn't even give a very good presentation. But I got the message. The message that he presented was, how do you see as a cosmetic dentist? And that made all the difference in the world. Then when I went to his class...
How do you see?
How do you see physically? How do you see a tooth? You see two teeth where a central, where if you remove a 0.5 millimeter or 1 millimeter of tissue, the teeth will look better. It was really kind of, what do you need to do to make a case look better? And I have been in offices here where a patient walks in, they got 10 grand in their pocket, and the dentist, boom, he preps 8 teeth or 10 teeth, and no preliminary, no wax up, no nothing presentation. Had a guy the other day was in an office I worked there as a temp. The guy walked in, $25,000. He walked out with all of his teeth crowned. No articulation, no pre-setup, no wax up. Just the guy walked in with money, so I'll do it. But that's another story. So from that, I could see how to do it. I went back to my patient base, presented it differently, could see differently, and like I said, next year practice went up $200,000. So I can show you some pictures, which I'm proud of, what cases that I did. So my advice to them is hone your skills, because once you get out and you buy a practice, you're going to be presented with a certain presentation of how is the practice running, how is it run, what's going on. And my consulting philosophy, when I consulted, I presented myself as my technique was the peel the onion technique. It's the same way in golf. There are certain golf professionals, golf instructors, who try to pigeonhole you and take your swing and make it into a box. David Ledbetter is that way. And then Rick Smith in Michigan, he takes your swing and he adapts, changes vis-a-vis your swing. So it's the same way in dentistry, is that you're given a business model when you buy the practice, and then you need to learn. You need to go to classes just like you do. I personally feel if dental school were 20% taught in the business school, dentists would be much better off. Because there's so many, there were a couple classes in dental school. I went to the first class, the midterm, and the final and got an A. But, that's old school. So I think that learning the business side of dentistry is just as much a learning experience as the dental side. So when you're young, you need to hone your skills. And my recommendation to any dentist is never be the same dentist today that you're going to be in 5 years. Now, I did that with CIRAC. I was the 62nd person in America to get a CIRAC 1.
What year was that?
1991.
Okay, all right, so that's the year I bought mine. So I would have been right there with you.
Right. And I went through CIRAC 1, and I went through CIRAC 2, and then CIRAC 3 was coming along, and I really didn't know that I wanted to continue with that investment, and I really kind of switched more towards veneers and cosmetics. But I used the training, out here when I see the young kids, everything's a corner crown. I don't see anybody ever think about an onlay, ever have a 3/4 crown, retaining good tooth tissue by not cutting the whole tooth down. And a lot of what I learned in CIRAC dentistry applied to my technique and my philosophy as I continued in my career. But
isn't the disappearance of the inlay and the onlay because insurance driven? 82% of dental offices in America take PPOs, and if they send in an inlay and onlay, they're going to get denied the claim. But if they send in a crown, that's true. But do you agree with that? Yeah, but the 3/4 crowns and crowns. Where do you define the crown? Now, when I was doing CIRAC, we ran into that same issue.
Now, the original definition of an onlay was if 2/3 of the incisal incline, of the occlusal incline, was involved, then it was acceptable as an onlay. Well, as CIRAC came and more inlays were classified as an onlay, they changed the rule. So what you had to do is you had to replace a cusp. If a cusp needed to be replaced, then an onlay was acceptable. So, then you start to decide where is a crown. How much more tooth do you have to remove to really classify it as a crown? And then you start to get into semantics and even legalities. A crown doesn't necessarily have to be 100% of the tooth. But,
Okay,
I'm not a lawyer. So.
We're giving away our age talking about Larry Rosenthal. I don't know if the 30 and under crowd knows.
No.
I got to tell you my famous Larry Rosenthal story. So Larry Rosenthal, the largest city in the United States is New York. I mean, the what's the city? 10 million, 12 million. The metro is probably 15 million. Phoenix is only metro is 4 million. And he had a practice limited to cosmetic dentistry, mostly veneers. And he was a good-looking guy, long hair, which I've noticed a lot of the successful cosmetic dentists, they all have that look. I mean, like, who's the guy out in Dorfman?
Bill Dorfman.
I mean, he could be a model.
Right.
I mean, I always see who would go to a short, fat, bald guy for cosmetic stuff? I think it.
Well, they
really,
are. Dickerson is a good-looking guy.
Yeah, Dickerson. I mean, so one thing, if you're going to go into cosmetic dentistry, I'll never forget. I got chewed out so bad with. Remember Jim Pride?
Yeah.
He was a consultant. He passed away a few years ago. He's a practice management guru, and he was saying how anybody could sell bleaching, bonding veneers. And I was sitting in the first row, and I raised my hand. I said, "Well, look at you. Your teeth are completely gnarly, mangled, brown. I mean, I can't even believe you're a dentist with those teeth." Oh my God, I thought he was going to hurt me. He almost punched me. And my point was that the people selling all the cosmetic dentistry, they're all good looking and handsome and movie star teeth and all that kind of stuff. But what Larry taught me the most was a couple of things. Number one, everybody always tries to sell cosmetic dentistry to the young beauty queen at ASU, thinking, well, you're already a 9. This will make you a 10. Larry was the first guy who realized that if you're worth $100 million in the United States of America, most people think that person is like some Donald Trump guy, some industrial guy. It's not true. They're 80-year-old widows. Their husband worked his brains off, died of a heart attack at 65. They put it all into a bond fund that's just been accumulating. And Larry, I spent the day with Larry, and he'd do these like $50,000 a case. And it was $50,000, and that didn't matter if it was upper 6, 8, 10, upper, lower. He didn't even care. $50,000, who cares how many it is? But then you go to lunch, and he would get in his black Porsche with his long hair and sunglasses, and he'd go hit some restaurant. He wouldn't even eat. He would just walk around there to all these 70, 80, 90-year-old Manhattan women say, "Margaret, my God, you're so beautiful." And she'd give him a big hug and a big kiss. Then he'd grab her cheek and say, "Margaret, if you came to my office and I put veneers on there, you wouldn't look a day over 65. And they were just melting in his arms. And then after work at 5 o'clock, he said, "Let's go back to my place." And from his office to his place took us 3 hours. He hit 5 different clubs just walking around, kissing old ladies, hugging old ladies. He was the most genius business networking guy, and he knew who to target. Old ladies have $1 million in cash. The 29-year-old ladies, like these 29-year-old ladies listening here, they got student loan debt and they don't have a dime. So Larry knew where the money was. Big city, good looking, focus on the 80-year-old ladies. And if you want to be a cosmetic dentist, you should be a geriatric cosmetic dentist because those ladies got cash. But I want to go back to...
Wait, let me interject a second. So I've done a very unscientific evaluation of success and beautiful teeth, and there's no correlation. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Jack Welch all have horrible teeth.
Gnarly.
Horrible, gnarly, brown.
And they're as bad as Jim Pride's teeth. Remember his teeth?
Exactly. And so...
Remember Walter Haley's teeth?
Yeah.
My God. Yeah. He was like, "Do you need a denture?"
But it really is a need. There was a gal that I have. I'll show you the picture when we're done. For 10 years, she had tetracycline staining. She's an attractive gal. For 10 years, let's do this. When are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? Yada, yada, yada. 3 weeks after the divorce started, she came in to get him.
Yeah.
So, and then I have another one that I'll show you, kind of my premier case.
We'll post these with the podcast.
You can do that. I'll show it. And the girl who, she was a nurse, and the case was $30,000. And she said if she had known how it turned out, when you see it, I took 20 years off her life. And she said I'd have spent 60. I said I should have charged her more.
Well, post that case on Dental Town.
Yeah, okay.
And then, Ryan, when we post this podcast, we'll post it right under the thread you started of your case. So post that on Dental Town.
I'll show you the picture before.
Yeah. But I want to go back to something you said earlier about.
Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say with the number one advice I would give a young dentist, especially one who has bought a practice, is don't practice for money.
Marry for money.
You marry
don't
for money.
Practice for
but
money.
Don't
Just
practice.
Marry for
don't
money.
practice for the dollar. That's, like I say, the difference with corporate. Corporate is bring them in the door, get them in the chair, do as much as you can because they may never come back. I had a guy who was a tremendous dental phobic. I saw this guy for 6 45-minute appointments and never looked in his mouth. And then he did $30,000 worth of work once we had established a relationship. So there's enough dentistry to make every dentist that goes into dentistry a very wealthy person. You don't get wealthy being a dentist. I don't think dentistry is the kind of profession that, there's the individual guy, maybe the endodontist or whatever, but in general, the income a dentist can generate is sufficient wealth to create wealth if it's invested properly and it's grown in a proper and conservative way. But I don't see very many dentists making $400,000 or $500,000 a year. I mean, that's not the target income. Maybe 175, 150, maybe 200 as a general, income perspective. So my suggestion is build relationships, which any successful thing in life is built on that. Build relationships, take your time, do it properly, do it the way that you get the best long-term results, and don't practice for money. The money takes care of itself.
Well, you remember when it was about a decade ago or maybe two, when that book, The Millionaire Next Door, came out, written by 2 PhDs who studied millionaires, who once again proved, like the richest man in Babylon, it's not what you make, it's what you save. And as a percentage of more teachers were millionaires than physicians and dentists, because they made a fraction of the income, but they were just far greater savers.
Sure.
So they saved from 25 to 65 and had a chunk of change at the end. And these dentists get out and they buy big houses, big cars, big boats, big vacation. Everything they do is high cost. And they seem like they're still in debt when they're, 55 or 60. But I'm going to go back to the essence of what you started talking about earlier, which was you talked about, how you treat your staff, how you treat your patients. I find it amusing. I just recently lectured in like Wichita, Kansas, and St. Joe, and these little farm towns where like you go to Wichita and there's like 500 dentists. And they're all freaked out because like one corporate dental came in office there. But when you look at a dental office, if a hygienist, the average dentist has one hygienist 4 days a week, so 8 hours a day times 4 is 32 hours a week. The average hygienist sees their patient twice a year, and takes 2 weeks vacation, so she works 50 weeks out of 52. So for 25 weeks at 32 hours a week, she can clean 800 people's teeth, and then she'll clean those 800 people's teeth the second half of the year. So if that office is getting 25 new patients a month, every 2.5 years, you'd add another full-time hygienist. But every dental office you go into, their hygiene capacity never changes. Decade after, they have one full-time hygienist 4 days a week. You come back 10 years later, They still got one hygienist 4 days a week. Come back 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, there's old Bessie, still cleaning teeth, Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5. Yet that office had 25 new patients come in the front door every month. So simple math says that 25 existing patients went out the back door. And then when I go around my community, and anybody I talk to, that's 70 years old, I'll say, how many dentists have you been to in your life? And why did you quit going? Did they die? Did you move? And if that person had lived in that town his whole life, he'll just tell you the 5 dentists he's gone to and why he left and never came back. And then I go into dentistry and everybody wants to talk about new patients, advertising, marketing. But it's not new patients and advertising marketing. It's patient loyalty, staff loyalty, patient retention. So talk about that. Talk about how do you keep customers for life, and why has nobody ever done it?
Well, that's the difference between corporate and private practice. They don't care about retention. Believe me, they give lip service to it, but they don't care. Well, I worked for a group named to be not given.
Yo, you can tell.
At one point, they had 300 new patients a month come through the door, and they had 2 hygienists. Now, what you're saying is true, but what you're talking about is called, from a consulting standpoint, it's called the hygiene gap. So if you take the average number, if you take the number of patients, so let's say you have 1,500 patients in your practice. So that means you should be doing, on average, 3,000 profis a year. And if you do 2,500, your hygiene gap is 500. So times, let's just say $100 average, you're talking about $50,000. So there's a question there. How big is your hygiene gap? What can you do about it? How is your recall system effective? Are you keeping in contact with your patients? The office that I worked at that had 300 new patients come in the front door, they had no recall system. They didn't care. And I said to him, you should have probably 10 or 12, just exactly what you said, 10 or 12 hygienists here. But you get attrition, you get people that move, you get people that died. In fact, if I can give you my philosophy, when I got out of the service, I worked for a guy in Ann Arbor, Michigan named Carl Woolley. And this was in the amalgam era. And Carl had a patient who must have had 25, 30 incipient cavities, little specks in the enamel, not into the dentin, into the enamel. Now, I know dentists out here fill every speck they see, but I learned this from Carl. So this guy came in, and Carl did his right side, did every tooth, I don't know how many surfaces of amalgam. He was then scheduled to come back and do the other side, and the guy got transferred to Kansas City for 5 years, never went to a dentist. He came back to Carl to get the rest of his work done, and what do you think the x-ray showed? The lesions were exactly the same as they were 5 years down the road before. So that, for me, promoted a conservative approach to dentistry. And I don't know if I congratulate myself, but I'd say I was 99.9% correct, and unless they moved and I never followed the patient, where I would say to a patient, we don't need to do this today, we can always do it, and then it never proceeded into a root canal, so to speak. So it was just a conservative approach, and as I go into offices that have a schedule, I can't tell you how many of these incipient lesions are scheduled to be done. But that's, again, old school philosophy, I guess.
But the new school philosophy isn't working because they're just burning and churning patients, and in 1950 no one advertised.
Right.
Then it was 1% should be spent on advertising. Right. Then it's 2%, 3%. Now the biggest gurus out there are saying that 5 to 7% of gross collections should be spending on advertising. I mean, when are they going to realize that patient loyalty and customers for life is a hell of a lot better strategy than spending 7% of collection on
that? To me,
marketing?
Is the difference between, from my perspective. Now, maybe all practices aren't like that, but I've been in enough practices, corporate and non-corporate, and I knew nothing about corporate. When I moved out here in 2005, there was no such thing as corporate dentistry, or at least in Michigan. So I see that as the big difference, is that in corporate, get them in the chair, get the work done, because they may never come back. Again, bottom line, every day times how many stores you own. That's what I see in corporate dentistry. Now, I give corporate dentistry a big thumbs up. They're responsible for, and insurance, but putting the lid on, on fees. But then again, I can I can criticize dentists. I understand that insurance companies, Delta, let's just take Delta Dental, they set their reimbursement based on what dentists are charging. And I know most dentists, they don't raise their fees 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Well, if nobody raises their fees, Delta Dental's going to pay the same amount. You should be raised. When I submitted my fees to Delta Dental, I looked for the stars. Every fee that I submitted was over their maximum. Now, I didn't get reimbursed necessarily, but I was helping the community by setting a base. If everybody did that, then they would eventually, raise their fees to some degree. But that was been my experience.
My very good buddy Fred Joyle always talks about, marketing is everything, and I always think it's HR, managing humans, managing monkeys is everything. And I think the hardest thing for these kids to do is to walk into a dental office in your late 20s and be a leader and manage the staff. And so I want you to talk about what advice would you give them? How can they learn how to be a leader? How are they going to learn a team? Okay. And why do they even want to learn a team? Is it really advantageous to keep team members for life like it is customers for life? Or is staff turnover a good way to keep labor costs down? Every time they want to raise, fire them and go back to Walmart, get the greeter, and get another one.
The importance of staff is priceless.
It's everything.
And the longer you keep people, there's nothing more rewarding in your practice. When Mrs. Jones leaves town for 12 years and comes back, and Mary's at the front desk, Mrs. Jones, how are you? We missed you. You are doing so great. My staff, my hygienist was with me before I left 25 years. My front desk gal was with me 18 years. Well, 18 years I was in a group practice, and my partner and I, we had a very amicable split. His son was coming in. He was 12 years older than me. I didn't want to practice with the son. We were still great friends. We're friends. I referred dentures to him because he makes the best dentures in the world. The girls, Sharon has worked there for over 30 years. Carol worked there for 30 years. There is nothing worse than staff turnover. It takes, I don't care how good they are, in my opinion, it takes 6 to 12 months for any staff person to really be acclimated to your practice. So I treated my staff like family. I never was asked for a raise because I actually had a spreadsheet that showed me exactly how much I was paying them. So that was a business decision on my part. What's your hourly pay? How much for insurance? How much for bonuses? How much for this? And then if somebody would come to me and say, hey, I'm making $18 an hour, I'd say, well, let's take a look at that. Well, here you're getting $18 an hour because staff sometimes think that benefits don't cost, but I'm actually paying you $25 an hour. And then there's other times when I would just walk up to somebody because I could see that they were underpaid. I'd say, you know what, I'm going to give you a raise. You're doing a great job. I can look at your numbers. Let's give you a raise. It's the same thing with bonuses. I don't believe in calculated bonuses. You take the first 3 months and you divide by the number of moon cycles, and then you give your staff 1/3 of 1% every quarter. What that does to me is it becomes expectation. Right. And I had an interesting example of that. I got to the point in my practice where I could give my staff $500 a year at Christmas time, $750 at Christmas time, $1,000 at Christmas time. That was their bonus. The $1,000 went on for several years. At one point, we had a year where I just couldn't afford to give them $1,000, so I gave them $750, and they were all disappointed because they had already spent the $1,000. But your staff is your family. Here's the reality, young doctor, let me give you this advice. If the patients don't like you, but they love the staff, they will come. Yeah, if they don't like the staff and they love you, they will leave because I'm not putting up with that bitch at the front desk any longer. So staff is so important, and I see offices that staff comes and goes. Arizona seems to be that for me. I don't know why.
It's a very transient city.
Yeah, I think
it's like LA and Miami.
I think a lot of it comes from distances. People take a job, they live in Ahwatukee, and they take a job in Scottsdale.
10% of the Valley's homes flip every year. 10% of the homes that flip are Canadians.
Right.
I mean, this town, they're just, everybody's coming and going. It's like you still talk about you're from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I still talk about I'm from Kansas. Right. It's almost like Kansas is home for me, Ann Arbor's home for you, and we're just doing business in Phoenix for a long time.
Well, like I say, a friend of mine is a dentist, and he went through. He had more staff in the 8 or 9 years that I know him. He just sold his practice and retired than I had in 30 years. 4 different people at the office managers, 1 embezzled from him. Dental assistants came and go like water. 5 or 6 different hygienists. He only had 1, but 5 or 6 different hygienists. And the thing that I think is the proof in the pudding to how to run a dental practice, and a lot of it comes through social media. I am in contact with so many patients of mine and so many staff people that I have worked with in my career that just goes to show that once you build the relationship, and if you build it strong, that's the essence. You talk about marketing. Marketing isn't necessarily sending out flyers to the next, to the neighborhood. Marketing is taking care of your patients in such a way and learning to become part of their family that they refer, that they stay, and they're the ones that do the work over time. And you may not be now. Look with that young gal. It took me 10 years to do a $8,000 or $9,000 case on her, but it was the right time. It was the appropriate time for her, and then I was able to deliver to make her life better because now she was facing a divorce.
They are like family, and I've always told every girl who works for me that after you work with someone for 5 years, that close and intimate, they always psychologically turn into one of my 5 sisters.
Right.
And I pigeonhole them to which sister they are. I had one girl leave me after a decade and transferred to, Hawaii. But I told her when she left, I said, I swear to God, you ever come back to this town, you have your job.
Right.
A year later, came back. I just lost one the other day, Christina. After 15 years, her husband's transferred to San Francisco. And I still, I every time I talk to her, I say, I hope if he ever gets transferred back, you're back. But yeah, I got 10 staff that actually stayed longer with me than my ex.
Yeah.
How's that? It's pretty. They got to do 20 years just to be with me as long as my ex stayed with me. But I don't know if it's one thing to give instructions on how to drive from Phoenix to LA, but they're sitting there 30 years old saying, "Well, why the hell do I want to drive to LA?" And so you're talking about the importance of staff, but I want you to go back to why, though. Why is it important? Why is staff turnover bad in the customer's eyes?
It's called relationships. Dental practices are built on relationships. I've been involved with, a network marketing company for 25 years. It no longer is there. But I've learned in that about relationship building. It's all about relationships. Why does somebody want to come to you? I mean, I had one incident, and some of it is your skill. There was one gal, and you can't be everything to everybody. There was one guy sitting in the waiting room, and I kind of went out, and he looked at me and he says, Doc, he said, dentists are like a pair of shoes. Sometimes you just got to change them. And that was fine, and he left. But then again, I had another gal sitting there in the waiting room. I didn't hear this, but my front desk gal did because just as an example, I don't believe in front desks with a window in front.
Oh my God!
I mean what does that say to the patients? Anyway, the woman that was an old patient of mine who had come back was talking to the new patient, and she was talking about me, and she said, he's kind of expensive, and I wasn't that expensive. I wasn't, the $30,000 guys. He's kind of expensive, but he's really good. He's really worth it. So it's about worth of what you do. It's standing behind there's a guy that I worked here for, name not to be mentioned. His attitude about patient complaints, let him go to the board. And that was his attitude. And he didn't want to deal with it. He didn't want to solve the problems. If they don't like it, let them go to the board. Don't get me started with that.
I had my attorney on here, sitting right here last week, Jeff Tonner. And I said, and we're so old that we can't even remember. He represented me at the board one time, and it was so long ago, and I'm so old that we couldn't even remember the patient, the case, nothing. And we're sitting there racking our brains saying, what was it about? We can't even remember. I want to go back to the bonus thing you said, because a lot of people think that.
Let me
go ahead.
Let me add one more point.
Go ahead.
So what I used to do with bonusing, I never gave the girls a bonus. I'd walk in the office on Monday morning, I'd hand out $100 or $200. It was always well received, it was always needed, and it was always appreciated. They never knew when it was coming. And I did that all the time. I did that throughout the year. So that's the way I handled bonusing. And you know,
I learned that in college too, that women love Benjamins. I just absolutely
exactly.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
But no, but that is so true, because if you have some scientific accounting bonus system, now it just turns into their salary expectation.
It's expectation,
and it's written on a check. It's not cool and sexy and all that stuff. But I bonus in cash too, and I bonus in cash, and I don't tax it or take the taxes out or anything. Because it just ruins that. Well, we put it in like a uniform allowance is what we do for the IRS. But when you have a good month, and mine was very simple. If it was a bad month, no bonus.
Right.
If it was an okay month or a good month, 100. But if it was better, 2 $100 bills.
Right.
And if I thought we'd crush it, I give them 3.
Right.
And when you go hand your dental assistant 3 Benjamins. Right. That's just cool, fun. It's cash. She stubs it in her purse. She just loves it. But the other thing I always notice is that I always hated the Christmas bonus, because number one, what does Santa Claus coming down your chimney have to do with running your business? And Christmas is already Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, Easter. Those are already big celebrations. How is a Christmas bonus gonna help motivate you in June, July, August? But what I always notice is the waiters is when you go to a nice restaurant and that waiter makes bank, when he's counting up his cash every night, he tips out the bartender who was working his butt off getting the drinks, and these his helpers who give her butter, go refill her iced tea. And one of the reasons I think we always did so much great money is because if I had to work through lunch, and Jan or Christina or missed their lunch, and I just sit there and did $1,000 root canal, and Jan was in there with me, and she lost her lunch, but the office did $1,000. I would go back to my office, and I'd open my wallet, and I'd go back and get some cash, and I'd go stick it in her pocket. She'd always say, no, you don't have to. Same thing, we'd be leaving at 5 o'clock. And someone would show up with a toothache. And we do a root canal buildup, CERAC crown, start to finish, 2 hours. And poor, Christina would leave at 7 o'clock. Well, I made $2,000. I mean, man up. Go in your office, pull out some Benjamins and say, hey, thank you. So I like the cash bonus each month. And I like to tip out the wait staff. And I hope that's not an insulting term to dental assistants and receptionists, but it's the wait staff. I mean, this is dentistry. I'm the dentist, and you guys are all helping me get the iced tea, get the butter, get it all done. But people love cash, and women especially love $100 crisp bills, because I believe that when you give them a check, they have to sign the back, they deposit in the bank, their husband sees it. It's all mechanical. But when you give them a $100 bill, they just go to the mall and buy some rockin' hot whatever, shoe, shirt, pant, whatever. It's just fun money. It's fun money, and it's money that no one else sees. Their husband doesn't see it. Their kids don't see it. It's just fun cash.
Well, I totally agree. And like I say, the bonus money to me was part of the year. In other words, I didn't give bonus money and just hand it out. I mean, I knew what their total compensation was. I considered it part of compensation, but it was never really looked at that way from their perspective. In other words, if you're given all your, I think that would be for me that would be the decision, or part of the approach to it, is that it was part of compensation. And even though it was distributed in different ways, like I say, my big thing is I never made it all the time. It was never expectation. because I found that people get disappointed. If you give somebody, let's say, cash every month, and then 1 month you don't give it to them, they're disappointed. And so like I said before, it's always appreciated, it's always needed, and it's always received, in a positive light. But that was just the way I did it. Now, maybe right or maybe wrong,
I think the rudest awakening that these people listening to your podcast are going to find out is, like myself and probably yourself, we were led to believe that if we went to college and learned calculus, physics, and geometry and algebra, that would be the secrets to the whole universe, and we'd be doctors, we'd be educated. And then you walk out and you find out that navigating the village and with your staff and your patients, managing people, leading people, is the hardest skill ever. And so I think Cretans are smart enough to realize that half the planet's boys and half's girls. I think Cretans can say, oh, that one's Mexican and this one's Vietnamese. But really smart people just see how the mind works. And we got 4 groups of people in our village, and we got the greatest generation retirees, we got baby boomers, we got Generation X, we got millennials. And I don't know if it's just a sign of my age, but it seems like every time a millennial tells me they have a office, an HR problem, a staff problem, whatever, I just see they have a completely different management style than our generation. Our generation didn't go to happy hour and get drunk and hold the girl's ponytail while she puked in the toilet. We didn't go to nightclubs with them. So what advice would you give the 30 and under millennials of how to be a leader in the dental office? Keeping in mind that your little drinking buddy at happy hour, you got to tell her to do bleachers tomorrow morning and be there in time for this half huddle. I mean, you reserve the right to fire her. How can you be somebody's drinking, partying buddy and then tell them, you got to do 25 push-ups or I'm going to fire you? So talk about leadership. How do you learn leadership?
I think part of that is being the kind of person that they can respect. I used to go with drinking with my staff. We went to parties together.
Did you ever hold her ponytail while she peeked in the toilet?
I did not do that, but I remember with one of my favorite dental assistants who was with me, she was with me 10 years, and then I retired, or I moved out here. We went the second week she was there, we went out drinking, and we would close the country western bars at 3 a.m. And she said, my God, where am I working? What is this? So I think what it is you need to create respect by doing things right. Be honest. Don't cheat the government. I mean, you can play the loopholes a little bit, but don't cheat the government. Don't live lavishly and not share with your staff. That's how you build respect. And again, there are other doctors. I mean, excuse the French, but you don't shit where you eat. I mean, there are guys that mess with their staff in lots of different ways, and that just destroys the respect for you. And
invites embezzling.
I mean, like I say, my friend.
And tell them why it invites embezzling, because it's the what do they call it? What do policemen do where they separate the two suspects? They say what happened, you say nothing. You say what happened, nothing. And then they come back and says, well, your buddy says that you're the one who shot him. Or, oh, I didn't shoot him, he shot him,
Right.
But you start sleeping with the staff.
Right.
And then she comes back and says, okay, you've been married for 20 years, you got 3 kids, and your divorce is going to cost you $1 million. You're paying me $25,000 a year.
Right.
I've been stealing $25,000 a year. I'll quit stealing from you, but now you pay me $50,000 a year. Or I'm going to go tell your wife, Betty, and then you're going to pay her $1 million for a divorce.
Right.
And the problem with extortion is you meet her demands, but she's still there, and it never goes away. Right. Yeah, sleep. I always could not believe that out of 3.5 billion women on the planet, the one you had to sleep with was an employee. Like Bill Clinton.
Right.
If he would have had an affair with Madonna,
right.
And when he got caught, just would have said, you know what, you be married to Hillary for 50 years. I'm sorry. I snuck out with Madonna one time. But it was with a 25-year-old employee when he was 50.
Right.
It was predatory.
Right.
And it was gross.
Right.
And so, don't be Bill Clinton. It's still his biggest scar on his resume, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
I mean, yeah. Except for in Poland.
For what?
Except for in Poland. I swear to God, I've lectured in Poland 4 times. Her name was Monica Lewinsky.
Oh.
And everywhere you go in Poland, they go, oh, I see your president likes Polish girls. And I'm an American, like, I didn't even realize, it ends in ski, so it had to be Polish.
Well, the other thing you were talking about, why do people have a consultant, let's say? And it's the same reason that Tiger Woods has a coach, to tell you the difference between feel and real. And when I look at dental practices like children are all the same. They're boys, they're girls. They have 2 arms, they have 2 legs, they have personalities, whatever, and yet everyone is different. Dental practices are the same. They're all the same. They have HR issues, they have technical issues, they have business issues, but yet everyone is different because the problems that exist in every one of those environments is different from the guy next door. So where somebody might be having an HR issue, this guy might be having no issue, and you have to deal with something else in order to straighten it out. Now, I know a friend of mine, just as an example, taking Jay Geyer's Scheduling Institute. It's cost him $100,000. I mean, it's a fortune to me. He's very big on getting the patient doing a tour of the office and all of the things to build relationships. All of that's good. So this one guy, and I guess you're supposed to have a wall of fame, your awards, your whatever. And I had one in my office, just different organizations I was in for diplomas from this, whatever. So this guy had one, but he had a lot of personal pictures on there. He had a ski trip here, and he had a trip down to the Bahamas, and he had this one, showing his family, thinking that he was building that relationship, the family relationship. Patient walked in his office, went down the street to my buddy, who's also taking the Scheduling Institute, and he did $30,000 worth of work because he said, I'm not going to go there and pay for this guy's next vacation. So they took the same information that they heard from a respectable guy, interpreted it differently, and the end result was the patient went to Dr. A instead of Dr. B, who we went to originally. So I can't over-explain, and you and I are definitely on the same page of how important the staff is. And I go to some of these clinics, and there's the people have been to 15 different places, and the doctor, they come and go like water, and for no good reason. There was a case today, a gal called me, I'm making a long story short, the doctor just fired everybody. And I didn't even know how he's going to work, but he fired everybody.
What percent of the dentists do you think are just completely batshit crazy?
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't say a percentage. I mean, I think it's probably the same as in society. Being a dentist doesn't include or preclude you from being crazy. I see so many things that I think are wrong, and I'm no angel. I'm no saint.
Robbie, I always thought you were an angel saint.
Right. But I just see so many decisions that these guys make and how their people are treated. I was in one corporate environment where the girl worked. She was working till 12:15, and the office manager said, "Well, we're going to backdate you to 12 for lunch." Because that's your schedule, is an hour lunch. I mean, those kind of things, then you get people in authority that shouldn't be in authority.
Well, let me tell you why I think you have to reduce staff turnover, and that is because you're selling the invisible. I mean, when I go to the store and I buy a bottled water, I mean, I know that's a bottled water. And so it's like, this is $1, the other one's 90 cents, it's easy. But when I take my car into the shop, I grew up with 5 sisters. I played Barbie dolls till I'm 12. I don't know anything about a car. So I take it to the dealer I bought it from because everybody's in a uniform and a name tag. I bought my car in 2004. It's a Lexus. It's now 2016. I took geometry, so how many years is that?
12.
12-year-old. It's got 125,000 miles. The car's never blinked. But the same staff are there. Their uniforms, name tags, right. You could eat off the floor. I trust that when they say the schedule of maintenance is this is what we do right. On a Lexus, whatever, I do it. And when they come in the office, you say, well, you need a filling as opposed to a crown, or you need a root canal, or this tooth has to be pulled. How the hell do I know if that's right or not? But when I look, and sitting next to Howard is the same dental assistant for 29 years.
Right. That says something.
They trust that we wouldn't be in business 29 years if we were pulling the wrong teeth every day. And when you're selling the invisible, you're playing a game of trust.
Well, I run into this here, and I've had personal problems being a temp in some of these offices. When a patient walked in my office, I assumed they wanted treatment. I would tell them what they needed to be done, and they would say, fine, you know. And I understand from a legal standpoint, when a person goes to a medical office, there's implied consent there. But that's for Jeff to really argue. Here, it's, well, we can't do anything without doing consent forms. I practiced 48 years or whatever. I never used a consent form, ever. Never felt a need for it, because if there was a problem, I fixed it. Here, you have a consent form. Now, wait a minute. What do you mean this crown is not acceptable? It's too white. You signed a consent form. You have a problem? Go to the board. That's incompatible for me in terms of how you handle a dental practice. It's all common sense. How would you want to be treated? Keep people around. The longer people are with you, it says something about you. And like you said, it's all about trust. If they don't trust you, they're going to leave. And it's a simple way to do it, and it really is nothing more than common sense. And if you don't know what to do, go find the education. Go take a business class. Go take my thing is, don't be the same dentist for 50 years, because if you are, you're going to get burned out, and you're not going to have the kind of career that dentistry can provide for you.
And you can listen to my 30-day dental MBA. I put it for free on YouTube. That's youtube.com/Dentaltown Magazine. I also put on iTunes. But I want to say one more thing about the dentist is living lavishly and not paying the staff or cheating them back 15 minutes on their lunch hour and all this stuff, builds resentment. And, when you go to lunch, maybe you're having a great week, you're having a great day, you're having a great time.
Take them to lunch.
Even if you're just a Subway, pick up the tab. Another thing is, dentists are so weird in that they think the staff party should be at their home, where they're showing off their gazillion-dollar home and their wife with their big rock on the deal, and it just even builds more resentment. Don't have Christmas parties at home. Put a staff member in charge of the team party, the summer party, the 4th of July party, whatever, and say, what do those guys want to do? Then on their own, they say, well, we want to go bowling, or we want to go see the Festival of Lights at the Phoenix Zoo on the Christmas lights, and do something they want to do. They don't want to go to your home and see all the money you've made, or that's not fun for them.
I experienced something like that in non-respective. When I was in the Air Force, where I lived in Spain for 3 years, and we took a vacation to East Africa and to Ethiopia, with Kenya and Ethiopia.
Love those countries.
And this was when Haile Selassie was still in power. And I'll never forget, right across the street from his palace, his lavish palace, was a slum city. Right across the street. I mean, this side were shacks, that side was a palace. And so you're right. I mean, people know you're successful, but if you share with them, they appreciate it. If it's a one-way street, you have a revolving door.
Yeah, and that last pope, when he left, went away in his private white helicopter to his lavish mountain.
Yeah.
I love the new pope. Francis come in, won't do the pope limo, won't do the entourage. And basically walks everywhere he goes to.
Yeah, now he's a good example. He's really a man for the world. You don't have to be a Catholic to respect that man. He has international respect from everybody, just exactly like you say. When I lived in Spain, we'd go to a lot of villages, and you'd go into the church, and it was poverty everywhere, and the church was gold and diamonds and I'm not criticizing the religion.
I am.
But well, that's different. That's a different story. But when you create this dichotomy between rich and poor, and unfortunately, it's happening now in our country. Is that the 1%, so to speak, get it all, and everybody else is will throw you the crumbs. It's just something that, to me, it's just common sense. How?
Okay, we'll end on. We're supposed to go 1 hour. We've already had 1:10. You're never supposed to talk about religion, sex, politics, or violence, but it's 1:10. We're two old coggers. I want to just say one thing about the politics. I found Bernie Sanders' message vulgar, because I know the millennials love him. That's why I want to tell them, because the government controls a third of all the money, between 3 million federal employees, all the taxes, programs, all the state stuff. And Bernie Sanders has no problem with the government controlling a third of the money. Then you have 1,800 billionaires who don't even control a percent, who all made their billions making just things like iPhones and Microsoft and Intel and all that. And he has the biggest stick up his ass with those guys. I mean, name the last innovation that the government came up with that you have in your front room, your dining room, your car. And I think the billionaires are better stewards of money than the government. And that everything needs checks and balances. The government needs to check free enterprise, and the free enterprise needs to check the government. But a guy like Bernie Sanders would and I also saw this, when he talks about free healthcare. Well, I just left 3 great civilizations. Ryan and I lectured in Tokyo, where dentistry is free and the reimbursement for a molar endo is $100. Paris, France, where the dentistry is free and you get $100 for 1 Benjamin for a molar endo. And then London. And when you talk to dentists in those 3 countries, do you think in Japan, when you drive your Lexus or Honda Accord to the dental office and get your free root canal for $100, do you think it looks like the one the endodontist did in Scottsdale?
No.
Oh my God. And then you go to London and no one will talk on the record. No one will talk on a podcast, but it's like, okay, well, I only get $100 for a molar root canal, but dental implants aren't on the schedule, and then I'll just do those and charge, fee for service and make a profit. So Robbie, that tooth needs to be pulled, and we need to do an implant and a crown, because you all believed in free. There's no free lunch. There's no such thing as free education. There's no such thing as free healthcare. And then the other thing the millennials do is they always point to, oh, well, there's this country in Europe that has less people in Arizona, and they do that. Yeah, they have less people in Arizona. 80% of their society graduated from college, and they always compare us to a country of under 10 million when America is a third of a billion. You need to compare America to only countries that have over 100 million people, and that's Indonesia and China and India and Pakistan. And when you have a huge country like this, it's very different economics than what you can do in Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. Agree or disagree?
Agree. And the one thing that nobody talks about free medical care. Number one, in the early 90s, I went to a lecture, and I heard guys stood at the front of the room and said, high quality medical care at low cost is incompatible concepts, as you're talking about the root canal. The problem with free medical care in a country is that in America, everybody wants free medical care on demand. And that's not how it works. Canada's like that. They have free medical care. And you need cataracts, we'll see you December of 2018 and we'll take care of that, because it isn't affecting your life. And so there's a lot of nuances. First of all, if everybody in the country had medical care, there are not enough doctors to treat everybody. And if you're going to make $75,000 a year and be a physician, how many physicians do you think there are going to be? Not very many. So, that's a whole nother conversation and a whole nother podcast.
Well, another way to explain it is, let's say that, forget healthcare, let's say cars are now free.
What are?
Cars. Okay, if Bernie Sanders makes cars free,
right,
there's not going to be any Mercedes, Lexus, Toyota, anything like that. If everybody was issued a free government car, which car would it be?
It'd be a Chevette.
Yeah, it'd be Chevette, and it would have been made in 1980, and it'd have 300,000
Right.
miles on it, and
Hey,
you'd
give me
be
your
placing
car.
it together with
Hey,
duct
give him
tape.
your Lexus.
Yeah. So, but anyway, hey, I just want to say that I think it's so cool of you to drive down. You had to drive. How far did you have to drive?
I don't know, 20 miles. Well, let me show you this.
For you to drive 20 miles down here after on your damn birthday. How the hell did I get you on my birthday to go share half a century of doing dentistry with all my young homies?
Well, I hope I did justice.